Welcome to another video of a playthrough of the game Order and Opportunity, making of the post-Cold War world order. We are starting the Russian turn, so starting here with the development segment, drawing a random event. This is international condemnation. Then it goes down here in Europe. So that event option is available there on the side. But we continue the Russian turn to the opportunity segment. Russia has nowhere where they can resolve an opportunity, so we pass straight on to the command segment. And here this is where Russians also draw their hand of 5 cards. They get a mulligan, which they make use of here, and decide to play those 2 political influence cards. So there's the Chechnya world event here in Russia itself. This is, as the red part here of the card shows, is going to cause a victory point loss to Russia if this remains unresolved until the first intermission called the globalization phase. We are in the action phase now, and then there's an intermission called the globalization phase. So if this goes unresolved until then, Russia is going to lose a victory point, so they have an incentive to try to get this resolved. The second incentive is that they will gain 2 victory points for resolving the world event, as shown here against the green background by those icons. And so Russia uses the card to bring political influence into their home space. Normally, per regular rules of play, powers may not place their own political influence into their own home space, but this world event creates an exception to that. So we discard the first card, and then we've got the second card. With this, Russia is going down here into Levant. So Levant has got 2 levels of Chinese economic influence. That means China is in position to resolve this opportunity here in the Levant. Next time it's the Chinese turn. Now, however, the Russians are blocking the Chinese. Whenever you equal or exceed the influence of another power, then you may declare that you are blocking them. You may also declare that you temporarily lift the block. If you do so, you can be rewarded one of these legacy point markers. So there are 2 different nominations: half a point or a full point. And these are victory points in the sense that you can, once you have 2 of these, you can convert 2 of them into whatever the total shown on the legacy point markers then is. These represent powers, participation in resolving opportunities, resolving world events and such. So essentially leaders building their legacy. So that's why Russia is deciding to block the Chinese there, in the hopes that they could perhaps score a legacy point. But that's something to be seen in the future, whether it actually happens or not. And then finally, Russians having now completed their turn and not having any possibility of taking further commands, they have no option but to pass. So they move the cylinder here onto the into the pass part of the sequence of play and the action phase track. So, and now in the past few videos, we've then completed the turns for the US, EU, China, and now Russia. And what happens next is we are not quite yet through the action phase, but those powers who are able may now take additional commands. So we go back around from Russia to in the order of play to the US player, who has now, so to speak, a second command of their turn that they may now execute. The US is eligible to execute such thing because here on their player mat they have an opportunity token that they've obtained during a previous turn. So we may now, or they may now discard the token like this, and therefore go on and play, nominate another suit and play cards as they like. The US hand is now empty, but they had those 3 military suit cards, which they've now played. There is a consequence to this, which is must not be forgotten, which is to decrease the US world order contribution. And since on the world order track the US dropped down all the way to low, they must pay a penalty, which is one resource. So we move the resource cylinder over there to 0. The first card the US decides to use simply for resources. So they add resources according to the economic influence track. So they may take this event option here. The event text refers to the US economic influence track here on the player mat, and the rightmost slot says 3, so the US will gain 3 resources. They were at 0, 1, 2, and 3 resources. This is the card used and discarded. This second card the US wishes to use here in the Middle East and place it down as a reaction card in one of the 3 Horizon event slots, as they are referred to in the game. The card goes, as we noticed in a previous video, sideways or slightly tilted here on the slot to indicate that it's not yet active. The US needs to pass for it to become active. And then there's one more card. This too the US places onto the map as a Horizon event, and this too is not yet active. And then finally this concludes the second command of the US, and they cannot take a third one. They wouldn't have any cards in the hand anyway, so they decide to move into the pass box as well. And then it's the EU turn. Before we do this, we can turn the US reaction events in the full horizontal orientation to indicate that they are now active. And so we continue with the EU turn. EU has also a second command that they had earned during a previous turn, so they play these 3 cultural events. The first one they play here in to the Middle East, again as a reaction ability. This is an interesting not as a reaction ability, as a Horizon event. This is an interesting event option here, available now in the horizontal orientation. This card can be used to resolve a world event. This gives an advantage in terms of the pacing. You can use this card at any point during your turn, whereas normally the world events have to be resolved at the start of your turn. So this gives more flexibility to the EU, who is obviously planning to address Bin Laden or the ISIS during a future turn. The second card EU decides to play into the Baltic states here, placing now one of those civil society markers there. This, remember, relates to the War of Ideas track here, which may bring even victory points to the democracies collectively, or then the authoritarians if the track moves far enough along. And then there's the last card remaining. This the EU uses to move the US world order contribution up 1 level. So the EU is worried that if the US is here on the lower levels, this will enable the authoritarians to take actions that reduce the world order, perhaps all the way down to low, but such that they don't have to pay the resource cost, the penalty, because the rule is, if a democracy is at one or two levels on the world order track, then the authoritarians don't have to pay the -1 resource cost. The thematic idea is that the democracies are tasked with leading by example and upholding the rules-based world order that way. And if they fail to do so, then the authoritarians also have free hands. So the US world order was at 1, and now it increases to 2, so they are not quite yet on the clear, but it's a step forward. And also the EU is now passing, they have no other option but to pass having conducted their second command. And with that, the EU cards will also be activated. The Horizon events, the US card we activate as well because they passed, and so here also in Europe.